Hi, thank you for being a part of Our Future 2024. My name's Randy Young Villegas, and I'm the founder and director of La Tierra del Jaguar. We use permaculture, regenerative agriculture, landscape restoration, all these techniques, all these tools in order to help restore ecosystems and communities. And if you're extremely passionate about all these different things and wanting to try to better our world, it's very possible that an individual business may not suit your needs and meet your goals. It may be that the path towards the impact that you're wanting to create may be a nonprofit. And so that's what we have become, and that's the work that we're doing. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about that and a little bit about how to go about creating that change in your community utilizing these tools as the basis for that. So the talk starts out up at the top of the map there in Tucson, Arizona. That's where I first started learning permaculture, landscape restoration, water harvesting, all kinds of different techniques. The initial intent was to create my own off-grid sustainable homestead. So just like many of you and many people all around the world, that was the dream at the time, was to be able to, have my own space that was regenerative and provided for my needs. And so that was where it all started. And at the time, I was doing handyman work and custom metal work and outdoor guiding as a mountain bike and hiking guide. And through the guiding job, I actually had this opportunity come up where a friend of mine who I had guided down in Mexico in the Copper Canyon region with in the past offered me, let me know that he was going on a mountain bike ride in Mexico. And of course, my ears perked up. And then he said it was on a Jaguar reserve. And I was like, what? You get to go mountain biking on a Jaguar reserve? And I asked, of course, if I could go along. And he went and found out and told me, yes, you can go. Um, and so I went down to near where the La Tierra del Jaguar mark is there, about the middle of the map, and spent a week mountain biking this beautiful, rugged, very remote terrain. And during that time, I got to know the director of the reserve really well. She was actually the one who had organized the ride. And it was a wonderful time to get to know that place and the needs that reserve had, the strengths it had, the employees it already had going, all that kind of stuff. It was a really great trip. And towards the end of the trip, I got offered the job of managing that reserve. And that was just incredible. And so, I went home and I thought about it a little bit and I was like, well, if I can, I have to. And so I wanted to have the biggest impact I could with my life. And so I decided to go down in and go full time and manage the Reserva Jaguar del Norte here in Sahuaripa, Sonora for about 3.5 years. And it's a beautiful, rugged terrain and so remote that there's still jaguars there. So, and in breeding populations. So it's a beautiful place. And so I spent those 3.5 years working there, mostly working out on projects on the reserve itself, the protected area, but also a little bit of work with community and a little bit of work with the county government, the municipality here. Um, and so I really started thinking about, what was the biggest impact I could have with my skill sets and my knowledge and my passion. And I felt like the protected area was already protected, and what really needed to change most was the productive systems around it, the different agricultural tech systems and stuff like that were being used. And so I decided I had to leave the reserve and move forward with a different template. And the basis for that process was um, knowing that the reserve was one protected point, and all of those are different jaguar sightings all over the whole state of Sonora, and you can see they're all over the place, and so the jaguar doesn't neatly stay on reserves, and so in those other areas the jaguar is in danger, and the systems were systems that I could improve upon. Um, the biggest threats to the jaguar in our region are loss of habitat, fragmentation of that habitat, and conflict with humans. Conflict with humans being the primary problem. And you know, the loss of habitat kind of leads to that, to more conflict with humans. The overgrazing of lands makes it to where there's not enough feed and water for as many prey species of deer and javelina and things like that for the jaguar. And so the jaguar does have to turn a little more towards cattle. But at the same time, no matter how that cattle died, whether it may have been sickness, it may have been dehydration, it may have been, you know, rolled down the side of a steep embankment. It could be a lot of different things. But however it happens, something is going to eat that animal once it's dead. And so quite often predators are blamed no matter how that took place. And so that's a major problem in our region for sure. Um, and that conflict with humans, you know, if the more those lands are restored and regenerated and the regenerative practices are being done, the more those humans can become allies of that nature instead of antagonistic. And so our agriculture is so out of whack that we see nature as a problem, as an enemy. Um, and it was really another part that made me decide for that change was that 80% of the land in Sonora is held by private ranches. Mexico in general has very little public land. It's very much private land based. Even a lot of the large national parks and stuff are mostly private land that is designated as national parks. So there's still, you know, cattle ranching and production going on in those lands. And when those things are done badly, the jaguar's in danger. And so I decided to start La Tierra del Jaguar. And why La Tierra del Jaguar is the solutions need to be people based. You need to include humans in the change. It needs to benefit the people who live in these communities and who own these lands in order for them to take on regenerative and restorative practices and really change the places they live. And you know, that landscape restoration is the next step in that. Once they believe, then that landscape will be restored. It will be you know, regenerated. Restored is an interesting word because, like, what point in the past are we trying to go back to? It's always changed, but we definitely degraded to regenerated and, you know, vibrant, biodiverse. That is what we want to go towards, is a biodiverse area. And then within all of that is the protection of those species. So whenever that landscape is restored, that water will be cleaner, the food will be better, there'll be more forage for the herbivores and therefore more herbivores for the predators, and those systems will balance and become strong and healthy again. And so this is what we really felt we needed to move towards. And the tools to do this are at our hands, right? They're our fingertips. But I like this quote a lot. It says, conserved or restored ecosystems should be tied to social processes that generate greater benefits for local people and the rest of society than other alternative uses of the territory. So, you know, that's the big thing there is generate greater benefits to local people, right? And other uses of the territory could be, you know, mining, it could be large scale agriculture, it could be, you know, the chemical industrial agriculture, it could be, you know, more development for people. And no matter what, those restored ecosystems should be create better benefits for the people in that area than those other uses of the territory, which are the ones that usually communities would consider to be more beneficial. I mean, you automatically get the landscape services, but you know, the different environmental services, but then there's so much more that restored ecosystems can really generate and create for the people that are there. Um, and in our area here, the economy is cattle ranching and mining. Those are the two primary things here, and they're both extremely extractive, extremely damaging to terrain, create lots of erosion, lots of, you know, in the case of the cattle, lots of overgrazing with poor management practices. And you can see that cow's not exactly chubby there, so it's struggling to get by, even though you do see vegetation in the photo. So these degraded landscapes are really a problem for the communities, and so that's, you know, what led us to want to create these changes. Um, and you know, whenever you see the cattle in these landscapes that aren't being moved and don't have waterers and aren't being worked in a regenerative way, you really do see them suffering and the landscape suffering at the same time. So once you start to regenerate that, it's a win-win. The mining side of things, we know all the disasters that can cause and the water pollution and all the different things. But it also degrades communities in that the people travel to the mines to work instead of working directly in the communities. It is slightly higher pay, so a lot of people will leave their other jobs, businesses, whatever it may be, to go do that and devastate the economy locally at the same time that they're devastating the ecology. And so they do cause quite a bit of damage in communities overall. And why did we choose the approaches that we're choosing to use to make these changes? Why regenerative agriculture? How is that going to save jaguars, right? Well, it does all the right things. It minimizes the ecosystem disturbance. It actually creates ecosystem services. It creates healthier ecosystems. And so that's a huge start to begin with. It really starts to regenerate those ecosystems completely. It improves the quality of life for the animals. The farm animals get to have a way better life. If you're cruising around in a chicken tractor, or if you're being rotated to green pastures regularly, if you're getting clean water, all those kinds of things, it makes for much healthier and happier farm life, especially compared to feedlot type situations. And then it preserves wildlife and habitats. Um, we talk a lot about green fencing, about keeping the areas that are wild around your land healthy and those ecosystems vibrant, because they provide the predators to the insect predators, or the wildlife predators, the owls that'll pick off the mice, the different things like that, the insect predators that will pick off the bugs that are eating all your crop. And also they provide the pollinators for all of that. So having the most diversity of healthy ecosystems in the region, the more biocontrols you have built right into the region. And then, it increases soil health. Soil is a big topic in these for sure. And it's the key. It really is the base of all of it. And in regenerative agriculture, we see that as the reality is that it all starts with the soil. That biodiverse, healthy soil is going to create the most biodiverse and healthy ecosystem and crops and all of it. And then in the end, in your own digestive system and in your own body, it's going to increase your health. But it also helps to filter that water. And so when that water is infiltrated on your land, it infiltrates and it becomes part of that aquifer, part of that landscape, and it literally starts to create more and more moisture within a landscape and a watershed. And so that restores the water and the aquatic habitats in a real way. You end up with much healthier, more vibrant water sources. And that is, again, water is the other key to life, right? Soil and water. And by avoiding the pollution and the chemicals and everything in these systems, and generally more and more in your life, once you start leading a more regenerative life, then that improves all that water system again and that soil again. And so these start to build upon themselves in a really beautiful way. And then they improve the conditions for farm workers. To begin with, they're not wearing a hazmat suit and a chemical respirator to go out and spray toxic things on their fields. But then they're also, able to eat right from those fields without having to wash the things, because they know everything's grown in a healthy manner, and they're able to, have healthier lives because they're having a more diverse income stream, which allows them to be able to, take care of their bodies better, take care of their lives better, live in better conditions. And so all of those come together. And there's also more employment for farm workers. Whenever you have regenerative systems, you tend to be more people intensive and less machine intensive. And sometimes that's your family or volunteers, but a lot of the time that's going to be employees from the community. And that's super valuable for that community and spreads that knowledge. And all of these different things support the local communities, right? Like when you've got that income, when you've got that healthy water, when you've got that, the ecosystem disturbances being minimized, all the different things come together into communities that are healthier and happier. And of course, they're all going to have healthier and happier produce and things too. And so a lot can be done through regenerative agriculture systems. And this is just kind of reiterating that it really does strengthen species diversity and improves the water quality and reduces human jaguar conflict to create these regenerative systems. The more you're partnering with nature in your systems, which is what regenerative systems are basically all about, the more you're starting to appreciate the different links in the chain of life and the way those different things come together and work together to create our world. And of course, the economic opportunities of regenerative agriculture. You can create worker-owned collectives to produce those products, because if you're just selling tomatoes, you've got a very short time frame to sell those tomatoes. But if you're creating salsas and creating different products, you can do a lot more, and you can have a lot more effect and a lot more strength in the market if you come together with other producers and produce under common location, tools, and quite often common labeling and stuff to be able to create something that is based in that community. And that all brings you right into the regenerative economy, and then having more cyclical systems. And then, in our case, we'll be using Jaguar labels to bring visibility to the cause and, slightly higher value to the product, as well as, some of these products will pay back into the nonprofit to help our programs keep growing and more to be able to be done in these systems. And then another important thing in our region and pretty much everywhere is creating ecotourism. It really helps people appreciate nature more. When people are paying to come enjoy nature, they don't want to see the trash. They don't want to see the all that kind of stuff building up. And so the people who are making money off ecotourism start to appreciate the cleanliness of those places and help and teach their communities, inspire their communities, invest in their communities, cleaning those places up and keeping them clean. And so that change starts to help improve the ecosystem and the natural habitat because of the financial benefit of that ecotourism. And so that's something pretty magical that can take place when the tourism truly has that eco component to it. And that's a very valuable and viable business and nonprofit all in itself. Landscape restoration really increases the security and connectivity of habitat. In this case, we're working on jaguars. You may be working on something completely different. It may be the habitat in general. It may be the community. But whatever it is, these restoration techniques help to make that land more resilient, to be more, higher organic content, more water, all these different things all make it more secure for whatever animals and whatever people are living from that ecosystem. And so, we've been degrading it for centuries now, and really putting the work in to be able to make those places healthy is key to improve our world in general. And jaguar protection really does start with the soil, and anything does, right? Like I mentioned a little while ago. And so when we talk about protecting jaguars, they're the keystone species. They're the top of that food chain in our region. And so in order to protect them, you have to protect everything below them. But sometimes people lose sight of that and forget that they need to start with healthy soil, healthy plants, in order to have those healthy herbivores, in order to have those healthy predators. And so it's important to look back and know that you start everything in the soil. Regenerative systems all start with the soil. So La Tierra del Jaguar, like I mentioned, is a 501c3 nonprofit. And we save jaguars by teaching regenerative skills and empowering people to partner with nature in places inhabited by jaguars. So that's our mission, and our passion is to do that work. And, yours, like I said, may vary. It could come from just about any direction, but it's important to kind of figure out what that is, and to harness that passion and figure out, how am I going to solve these things? And generally speaking, for the impact regionally that I'm wanting to have, I think the nonprofit is the right structure to be able to do that with. And so a lot of people think it's daunting to start a nonprofit. It's really not that difficult. I did this by myself. I didn't pay a lawyer or anything like that, or a notary. I just jumped through the hoops myself. There's plenty of different tutorials that can help you learn these systems, learn to create this paperwork. It's all available online. And so I'm going to go through the steps to do this in Arizona, because that's where I did it. It's going to vary some state to state. It's going to be, variable to some degree, but overall, it's going to be the same basic steps. And so I'm gonna go through those real quick for you. It's a 12-step program. So the first step is to name the organization. You have to come up with a name that you like, that you think is catchy, that you think is memorable, that talks about what you're doing. Some people like to create a series of letters that from the letters and from the words and abbreviate it and make that be the word that matters. However you want to go about that, but you need to come up with a name before you can fill out any of the paperwork. So that's the first step, and sometimes it takes a while because you're really thinking a lot on it. And then you need to recruit the people that are going to be involved in it with you. I started out just myself, and then started recruiting the initial board of directors. And so if you're someone who's passionate and who comes through on things, then you'll have people willing to step up for you. Everybody I asked to be on the board of directors said yes. All the initial round. After that, I kind of went for some of the more difficult ones and got some of them too. So you want to recruit those people in. If you've already got people that you're aligned with and that you're working with towards these systems, then you can use them as some of the incorporators, and you can spread that load. But I started off with the load on my shoulders because the passion was there and the need was there. And so from there, you appoint a registered agent. Now, this is where a lot of people would have a notary or a lawyer. That's where that person would be as the registered agent. If you have a lawyer on staff or a lawyer that you work with regularly, generally speaking, if you need lawyers or notaries, it usually is because you've already got stuff to lose, kind of thing. I'm not trying to be rude here. It's just people who have more money are more likely to get a prenuptial agreement, right? And this is the same type of situation as that. If you need a lawyer for your paperwork and stuff because of the assets that you already have, well, that's different. But as far as having to do this, you don't necessarily need one. I'm the registered agent for my nonprofit, and it works out fine that way. And I know several people have done it that way. So, and then you want to prepare and file the articles of incorporation. These are kind of like your bylaws, and so these come together and are very important. And there's several things in that packet, and so that's the next step in the chain. And then you want to publish that incorporation. The incorporation is just like starting any other kind of corporation. It's just this is a nonprofit corporation, and so you need to publish that in a newspaper or some kind of a publication like that. You can find directions for doing that in your state. There's probably some small newspaper that does it really inexpensively, and so it's one of the formalities of doing this process. And then you file the initial report, and the initial report is basically saying who the directors are and all that kind of stuff, and gets that moving. And then from there, you need to obtain your employer identification number. The EIN is basically your social security number with the government as a nonprofit. So you have to get that established as the next step to move forward. And then all the way through this, you start storing any records you have from the nonprofit, any receipts, any work, all that kind of stuff. You start keeping really good records. The records are the most important thing in a nonprofit, to be able to show where the money that came in went, so that you're not, taking a profit. And then you establish the governing documents and policies. Those are going to vary greatly depending on the size of your organization. And so if you're a small organization like my own, the policies were pretty much me trying to doing the work as best I could. So there wasn't a lot of that. The governing documents, the bylaws was enough for me on that. But if you've got a whole group of people right off the bat, or you're going to right away come out with multiple programs going on and things like that, you've got the abilities and the stuff already going for that, then you'll need more policies and governing documents about how people should go through those processes. You need the basically the outlet, the template. I mean, sometimes my English and Spanish get mixed up, but you need that template to work from to be able to get those systems out there. And then you need to hold an organizational meeting of the board of directors. And that meeting is where you're going to vote for the president and the vice president and the secretary and treasurer of the nonprofit. And then you need to get your state tax identification numbers. That's going to be variable from place to place too, how that process takes place, but it's all fairly simple. You need that mostly as a nonprofit for the deductions of wages and that kind of thing, is the reason that we needed that. And then you apply for your 501c status. The 501c status is the one that makes you charitable organizations. So that's the next hoop is you jump through, and like I said, the information's out there for all these. The tutorials are out there online. I'd really recommend watching various different ones. People who are already really good at legal documents will only talk about the parts that were different to the nonprofit, maybe. And people who don't know much about documents at all will be much more in depth about each step they had to take. And both have their values for sure. So it's important to get different sources on your information. Um, and the next big thing, of course, is where to look for funding. Some of the things that people can do, of course, is you can do GoFundMe's, different things like that towards the cause. Um, you can, family and friends. Maybe you've already got some funding, and that's that's how you're starting this all out. Um, but like any small business, you have to expect that it's going to take a while to start having income, and so you may need to keep your job for a while. You may need to just keep working. Um, part-time things to keep things moving until things start to really come in. And so I had sold a bunch of solar panels, and so that gave me my first year's funding. So that worked out pretty well. But then from there, one of the things you can do to start getting funding as the nonprofit is to check similar organizations' annual reports. They're going to talk about who their donors are, what foundations support them in those reports. And so if they're aligned with the same mission as you, then chances are those same donors and foundations would be interested in you. And then there's lots of online resources. This is one of many, but it's called fundsforngos.org. And they show grant opportunities and different sample proposals for you to use to create your own from. And again, there's lots of different sources to be able to find these different grants and stuff, but these kinds of organizations put that together for you. That's kind of their nonprofit strategy is to make those resources available for other small nonprofits, and so that's really valuable. And then you can reach out to corporate foundations and community foundations. So those exist all over the place. Like corporate foundations could be, the Coca-Cola, Disney, just about everybody has got the Waltons from Walmart. All of those have their own foundations, and so they're one source of funding. And if your mission and their mission in any way align with their foundation, then they're very likely to want to work with you. And so that's a very valuable one. And community foundations, like literally, there's the Arizona Community Foundation, there's the Southern Arizona Community Foundation. There's a lot of different community foundations, and so those will exist in your communities as well. So find out who they are and get there. Generally speaking, people who create nonprofits, it's not really the kind of thing where you're see other people doing it as being competition. Generally we want more work to happen in these communities. We want more change. And so a lot of the time, if you need help with any of these, with, how to go about things, you can contact other nonprofits and ask them about it. Because quite often they'll be very happy to let you know or point you in the right direction. And so yeah, that's just a little bit about funding. I could go on and on about this for a long time, but there's also other people that have that information out there for you. This is just kind of to get you comfortable that it is possible. And at this point, in this next year, we've got salaries, we've got the money to pay for employees, we've got the money to do programs. We're still new, we're still small. We don't have a lot of funding for all those things, but we have enough to know that we're going to continue to create change and to improve our communities and our ecosystems. So the next big thing was figuring out, I knew what I needed to do in my region, but for you, it may be figuring out like what those needs are and how do you approach them, right? I talked about regenerative agriculture being the tools, but you don't, if something is, for instance, a saw, you don't necessarily need the same saw for different types of cuts. You might need a chainsaw or you might need a miter saw, so depending on what the needs are in your region and the needs, I think in a lot of places are to obviously regenerate the soil and the ecosystem, but where we are, we're dealing with a lot of loss of topsoil, desertification of the landscapes. Buffalo grass is an invasive grass that's been planted in for cattle that you almost can't kill, but it is very devastating to landscapes. It burns really hot and its seed doesn't mind it. So it will kill large trees and that kind of stuff when it burns. It burns at like 1400 degrees, and typical fires in our region are about 400 degrees. And so a huge difference. And then, chemical fertilizers were one of the other big problems. And all of those were leading to lots of biodiversity loss, lots of erosion, and a lot of release of CO2 into the atmosphere. And so causing a larger problem globally. Um, and, then you figuring out what systems are going to work in your region, right? Like I had quite a bit of time that I was thinking about, okay, so if I want to do food forests and agroforestry systems and want systems that are going to, regenerate landscapes and economies, what am I going to do in my arid region? I'm in a semi-arid land here. We get about 22 inches of rain a year, and that comes mostly in the summer monsoons. And our high temperatures in June, the average is about 104. It gets quite a bit hotter, obviously, if that's the average. And the average low in January is about 47. So we do get pretty cold and we get pretty hot, that's for sure, and not that much rainfall. So it has to be things that are adapted to my climate, right? The more temperate your climate is, the more different things you can experiment with in those areas. But in order to create a large scale regenerative change, the things that you're working with need to be regionally appropriate. And so, or you have to put in a lot more input, and a lot less people are going to be willing to do that, I feel. And so, this is a thorn scrub environment. You can see it's very deserty out here. So we definitely needed to figure out what things we could do that were adapted. And on the left, there is a pitaya. Um, that's a macho ocotillo there. That's a little echinacea cactus. That cactus, pincushion cactus, the fruit on that are really yummy, but they're tiny. And that's a echo right there. And then these are hackberries here on the end. So those are all very much native plants. The one on the left, the pitaya, that produces a fruit that is a commodity. It's a viable product, and so that is one that is definitely very much on the list of things that can be used in the region here. But what we settled on, and what I finally came up, you know, discovered all the benefits of and was able to utilize is mesquite and agave agroforestry for our region. Like I said, this may vary where you are. I'm just going to go through, the reasons that worked for me and the things that we're doing with that in our community so that you can take these ideas and adapt them as needed. But these are regionally adapted crops. And so these are actually native crops to our region here. And so they do a lot, but then there's a lot of other regionally adapted things that will be planted in there, like things for essential oils and things that can be used in soaps and cosmetics, different pollinator plants, all kinds of different things that can become part of that diverse ecosystem and also part of that diverse economy. That's the magic for all these things we're trying to implement here. These things draw down carbon in incredible amounts. Agaves, they use cam photosynthesis and breathe at night, in other words, and so that makes them very, very good at adapting to arid environments. They're very strong in that way, and they draw down enormous amounts of carbon. And the things that we make tequila and bacanora and different things with is that basically those sugars, and all of that is all the same kind of processes. So there's a lot of strength in those agaves, and they store a lot in the time frames that they're growing. And then they can help raise the water table by becoming some of that erosion barriers, and then they stop that erosion and infiltrate that water. The waste from the mesquite agave agroforestry, the leaves that you cut off the agaves as you go or as you're harvesting them, either way, and the seed pods from the mesquite that have hit the ground and started to rot can be made into a probiotic animal silage that is really valuable for cattle and is really healthy for them, because those probiotics for animals that are very much in need of that after dealing with our terrain and like I said, the dirty water and stuff currently, eventually the water won't be so dirty, but those probiotics will still be very good for them. But that's a huge thing that can help make cattle that's been kind of hurting be really healthy really quickly. And becomes another product for these producers as well. And then all of this diversifies the production of products, a lot more availability. I'll go into that a little bit. So we started having these workshops on mesquites and agaves, and you can see we have those in anywhere from a full-on classroom type setting to a little palapa out on a parcel of a growing, agriculture parcel. And so those vary greatly, and working with that community and getting them to do the work on their own lands and really start to regenerate the land with the knowledge that it's going to help their economy and help their health is huge. And those workshops it's really important that the learning have a good amount of hands-on component and have a good amount of diversity in how you explain things. In these rural communities, like in this group here for this workshop that's in the picture right now, there was one person who's a doctor, and then there were several people who had never learned to read and had never made it to junior high. And so your approach and the things you're teaching should adapt to that clientele, to those people that are there. Um, they need that information to be digestible to them, to be something they can really appreciate and use. Um, and so things like this really help, like simple graphics, simple amount of information, and the key importance, of like increasing the organic matter by 1% increases the water absorption by 20,000 gallons per acre. Like this is a stat that people use all over. Another thing we do is we make sure that the pictures that we're using and stuff have the animals and the plants and things that the locals identify with, because otherwise it's like those systems work somewhere else, but they won't work here. And so it's important that people see their sense of place where they are as part of what you're showing them. And then, the regenerative agriculture against extractive agriculture, these types of photos, these types of images, about carbon being stored in the soil instead of the atmosphere, it really helps people to have good visuals that help them to absorb that information. And, a lot of us are visual learners. And so these types of things really, really click, and we have that image in our head forever. Some of the products that can come from just these type of agroforestry, and this is something you'll want to figure out, the diversity of products that can come from the things that you're going to use in your systems. So mesquite flour is a very valuable flour made from those mesquite beans that I was talking about, the same ones that you're using for the cattle forage if they hit the ground or get dirty. If they don't, if you pick them from the trees, you can make these flours that are low glycemic, sweet, really very, very tasty, very high in protein, very healthy mesquite flour, which you can see the products of up on the top row there. And then algarrobina is also made from those, but it's more like a Nutella type product, so like a thick syrup of sweetness. And then there's liqueurs and ice creams. There's all kinds of things that can come from that mesquite, as opposed, and also, of course, the mesquite lumber, the fence posts, all those things. But these things can all be taken from that mesquite without causing any harm to it, without losing a tree that took you years to grow. So these are year after year beneficial products, and that's where the key is with these types of systems, of course. Um, and the agave, wow, what a magical plant. Look at this list. Like, you can make bacanoras, which is our regional version of tequila. Like, tequila has to be from the certain region in Jalisco and that region down there. And bacanora has to be from our region of Sonora. So it's a regional um, tequila, agave distillate from right here. But food sweeteners, flavoratives, medicinal things, textiles, cosmetics, the aesthetics are just as ornamental plants. The environmental energy, in other words, biofuels and firewood, come from the agaves. Domestic uses of soaps and different things. In agriculture, it stabilizes the soil. It's a biofertilizer, and of course, you can make a biological insecticide with it. The biomass that I talked about for cattle is a huge one. Especially in these places where, and in globally, we grow a lot of our irrigable crops to feed cattle, and so if we can grow things that are higher value and better for humans on that land, and use a lot of things off of arid lands or non-irrigated lands to be able to feed that cattle, well, we're creating a win-win there in a big way for the local economy and for the producer's economy. So that's one of the magical things here, is trying to get that feed to come from um, somewhere that isn't taking up all our water and isn't taking up all our good soil for growing food, because we need more healthy food in our world, and that's for sure. Um, Other tools that we've been using that are sometimes not so thought about, is to create that sense of place, that connection to the animal, is murals. I've been doing murals in the community since shortly after I came in with the reserve, and they have had a real impact. It has been quite incredible to me to see the impact that they've had, because when I first got to these communities, if you talked about a jaguar, people immediately were negative. They were talking about cattle losses. There was no affinity. There was no love for the jaguar. People actually thought that the reserve had, some people thought that the reserve had imported them like on helicopters and stuff to the region. Cattlemen knew that they had been there, but a lot of other people didn't. And so giving the jaguar a sense of place and people a sense that the jaguar is part of their region and something to be proud of, is something that was very, very powerful. And, you wonder, like, how can you measure that kind of an effect, right? Well, now the municipio, which is the municipality, the county government, has a jaguar on their logo, and the high school sports team, they are the Jaguars. And so that's huge, right? Like, from only hearing bad things about it to the community embracing it to the point where they identify with it. And that is done through mostly the murals. I mean, working on the ranches and stuff had a say in it, but really that magic happened because the murals were all over their town, and so you automatically identify with that. And so don't lose out on how valuable art can be to create a change in your community. And of course, growing the leaders of tomorrow, working with the eco clubs, working with scholarships and internships. Those are all magical ways to work with the community. But I always like to warn people, don't put everything off on the younger generation. Like we say, well, they're the future. You have to teach them. Well, we don't want to give them a world that's already so degraded. We need to regenerate the world. We need to affect the adults and educate the youth at the same time. And the youth can be a great doorway into those adults' hearts as well. So definitely working with them is a very key item. Making sure that they appreciate what you're doing, that they get a connection with nature. These kids here came to the demonstration site for a scavenger hunt where we use plush toys of native animals for them to identify with those animals and what they do and where they are and how to not interact with them but enjoy them. Um, and then this is a really magical quote to me. Those who lead by example and demonstrate passion for what they do make it much easier for others to do the same. So being able to demonstrate that passion and show that you're doing the work, that you believe in what you're doing, is key to getting other people to buy in and want to do it. So that's why it's very important to me to create a demonstration site. If you don't have land, we purchased land to be able to do this little by little. I did, because I felt the need to create this change. But maybe you work with a community land that's been degraded, that they'll let you improve upon. You set up a contract with the community and do something like that. Maybe it's another private landowner that's open to the ideas and really enthusiastic about it. But finding a place to create a demonstration site and have these systems be is critical, because restoration projects don't have immediate rewards. You stack a bunch of rocks, you do a bunch of keyline work or a bunch of swales, whatever kind of work you may do, and it takes a bit for that to grow in and for it to be a benefit, and instead of just looking like holes or rocks. And so it's important to have places where people can see that those are already functioning systems for them to buy in and want to be a part of it. So the community can see and experience these regenerative practices in action. It creates a resource for learning and engagement within the community, provides training and jobs. That's really critical. We need to train people and get them out there in these systems. And a lot of people in these conferences are doing that. That's their work, is to train and teach people. And that's key, because we've got to teach the teachers and then spread that throughout the communities. And so it also is a place that we're able to provide the plants and organic supplements to the community for them to be able to take on these different types of systems. This is our demonstration site. There's arid land at the top. That's the thorn scrub type systems, matoral, as it says there. And then we've got irrigable lands to be able to create more permaculture oasis, a little more variety there in the irrigable lands down by the river. And then we've got the riparian corridor right at the edge. And that's pretty magical to have that variety of systems to be able to teach on and be able to create regenerative systems involving those different ecosystems. Skipped one there, sorry. So in our agave and mesquite demonstration site, there's the organ pipe cactus I mentioned a while ago, the pitaya. There's it being mentioned again. But we've got 1,000 agaves planted in this area, 500 of the organ pipes. That's actually a picture of another agave, but the organ pipes are in there, and then 500 prickly pear in what is about 2 acres. And so that's a good amount of plantings of these different native species. And it's important to do these types of systems. The prickly pear, for instance, will start to provide food and funding after a year and a half, maybe 2 years at most. Whereas the agaves are going to take 7 years to mature. The organ pipes may take 4. So it's important to have that kind of staggered systems where you've got multiple things that are providing income and, like I said, food sources. So um, we're also part of a native corn group. It's a federal program, and a university from down south of us in Oregon, Sonora, is involved in the program as well. And we're the only county in Sonora that has this program, and I'm one of the producers there, along with many other producers local. And it's pretty magical to be a part of that group and be able to help influence and make sure that people know about the different organic ways of doing things and all of that. Like where we're at, and in a lot of places, people talk about things being organic, people talk about things being regenerative, but they don't really know the systems. They were taught in chemical agriculture, and that's all they really understand. So getting involved in different programs and, not being overpowering, but offering the information and the capabilities can really help grow what you can do in a community. So if there's things going on already in the community, try to become a part of it, a valued part of it, a part that contributes, but also a part that appreciates the contributions of the others, so that people are open to you. Um, Natural building, like I mentioned way early on, is another really important thing that we're doing in the region. This is building our classroom structure and teaching structure. So that's what's going on in these pictures here. The dogs are always important parts of our work. Cholo was our general contractor for a long time, but he's passed on now, so his memory continues to be within all the work we're doing. This is our composting toilet, and it shows the different systems we're working with. You've got the rock foundation, and then the hyper adobe bags partway up, and then the straw bale from there to the top. The reason we did the mix here is because we're training our workers and ourselves on these different systems, figuring out our mixes, doing all that kind of stuff here on the composting bathroom. And then we'll be taking all that knowledge and taking it over to the larger classroom structure. So as we do each part here, we then go do that part on the larger structure. And this composting toilet, I call the recycling center. At the back here, where you see the scaffolding, that area there will end up with the 55-gallon drums for organic waste, for composting, for aluminum cans, for all that kind of stuff will go right there along with the composting toilet, so that people think of all that as recycling, including the composting toilet. So that's one of those things where, the wording can help people envision things. So calling the whole thing the recycling center helps to envision that recycling of the nutrients that we are producing, that we're taking in and then putting out. So here's that bathroom once it was completed. They become very beautiful. Some people say it's like pooping in a cathedral. So it's a quite a nice structure now, and a very enjoyable space to be in. A well done composting toilet does not have the odor and the nastiness, and so it's something nice to behold. People actually tour this, since our other construction isn't done yet. People just come over and they're like, "Oh, you got to see the bathroom," and they go over and check it out. So it's quite nice. Um, this is the big shade house structure nursery that we're building currently. This area is going to be very valuable for growing out all those different native and non-native plants for the different restorations and permaculture systems we'll be implementing on our land and around the community. The well there is kind of a magical thing. We made the well into a community gathering place. Instead of being the place you're worried about people getting close to the well and falling in, I made it the dining room table. And so I think that's a valuable way to change the perceptions of that valuable life-giving water, right? It's important to see that as part of the connection. Our projects for 2024, just to kind of give you an idea of where we're going in the next year, we're going to launch the Aliados de la Naturaleza program, the Allies of Nature, and that will work closely with 20 producers to restore 2 hectares of land each. And prepare that land for the Agave mesquite-based agroforestry systems, install water harvesting and soil retention systems on the land, introduce pollinator species if it's been heavily devastated. All that type of stuff is part of that program, and then we'll sign contracts with those folks, committing to regenerative practices and non-lethal wildlife control. So making sure that there is some continuity and some buy-in on that work that we're going to be doing. And then working with those producers to create the regenerative products and market them locally, nationally, and internationally. So that'll be one of the benefits for them of being part of our program is that we'll help them create those collectives, help them manage those collectives, and of course they'll be the owners of the collectives. So educating the community, we're going to expand our workshops and classes for the community, and we're taking on a full-time biologist this year who's going to be able to work much more with the high schools and the colleges in the area, and put out our information and our message, and help to work directly with the community and on those different landowners' land as well. And then we're going to be doing a big bio blitz. It's important to establish the condition of the territory you're on before you do all this regenerative work, in order to show the benefits and the change you've created. So document it with photos, document it with BioBlitz. BioBlitz means going in and counting in transects, in measured areas, how many bugs you see of what types, how many plants of what types, how many birds of what types, how many mammals of what types, all that kind of stuff, so that you have a baseline registry is really important to be able to know how to move forward. We'll be having lots of volunteer opportunities coming up soon, so if you're interested in that, you can sign up for that on our newsletter. A lot of people can really get a lot of volunteers. That can be a valuable way for you to be able to get people to help out with the work you're doing as a nonprofit. And so in a lot of places, that's really viable. Where we're at, the income is really low, so people don't have a lot of disposable time without disposable income, so it's really hard to get volunteers. So people will most likely be coming in from far away to do the work here. But we'll be hiring locally, but volunteering internationally. So, and then if you're interested in any more information about what we do and who we are, you can visit our website at latierradeljaguar.org or landofthejaguar.org. They both point to the same place. Again, I'm Randy Young Villegas. If you have any questions on starting your own nonprofit, just want to connect and find out more about what we're doing, or let me know what you're doing, you can email me at randy@latierradeljaguar.org. And of course, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram and all that kind of stuff. So I really want to thank you for being a part of this and for letting me be a part of it. Thank you so much, Matt, for inviting me to be a part of this. This is such a valuable, important tool for our world, and together we can make that difference. So definitely do whatever it is that you're going to do, where you are, with what you have, and have that impact, make that change. Even if it's just on your own little piece of land in your own little community, that's valuable. Every one of those connecting together creates an ecosystem, a broad range regional ecosystem, watershed ecosystem, national ecosystem, and international. We can heal our world together. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you soon. Thank you.